Interesting presentation. In many ways dovetails with the first presentation we have heard this evening. Somewhat broader in scope, perhaps for the young people in the room also a little bit frightening, not depressing. There's that one thought when I hear talks like this, if it weren't for conflict and whatnot, people like us wouldn't be in business. Of course, it might be a better world, but so there's perhaps something to think about. A lot of uncertainty, and the three scenarios bear close examination. As a U.S. citizen, I would like to believe that Europe is on the rebound, or will. That we can focus on things that concern us, such as the precarious state of our neighbor to the south, Mexico, for example. There are other things that one needs to consider. And I would like now to turn to a regional case study that brings in economics, I think, a little more explicitly. And this is from a young scholar who, but for a last-minute decision, might have been one of my students. I can't take credit for her brilliance, unfortunately. This is Valbona Zeneli, who comes to us from the Marshall Center in Germany. And the title of her talk, rather long, Committing to Deeper International Cooperation and Participation, with a question mark, Strengthening Institutions for Security and Development. Valbona, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Kalispera. This is the only word I know in Greek. I'm greatly honored to be here, and I really like to thank the organizers of this event. So a special thanks to Marius. I don't see where he is now. So thank you very much for this great event. So I'll talk about that part of Europe, so Southeast Europe or Western Balkans, that still has optimism, still wants to join EU, wants to join NATO, and has good faith in these two very important institutions. So I want to talk about future scenarios in 2020 or 2050. I'll talk what is happening now in this part of the region, in the Southeast Europe. Southeast Europe was touched from the economic crisis. So all the events of the recent financial and economic crisis showed that all countries of the world are part of the global economy, developed or developing, willing or unwilling, smaller or bigger. So the global recession impacted also Southeast Europe. And after a decade of macroeconomic stability and economic growth in this region, the boom came to an abrupt in late 2008. Some of these countries were lightly, the others were deeply affected from the crisis. For example, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, the most developed countries in the regions, they were heavily impacted from the crisis, while others such as Albania, Kosovo, Fyrom, it seems at least that they are lesser impacted. It seems that the greatest, the integration, the most severe also the impact of the crisis. At the beginning of 2008, there was a general feeling in this region that the countries was escaping from the global crisis. Governments were optimistic, somehow they were unwilling to understand what was happening in the global economy. And they continued to project sustainable growth for their countries. The truth is that, you can see here from the slide, the truth is that GDP growth in Southeast Europe slowed, stopped, or even declined. Taken as a whole, the regional GDP declined of 5.5% in 2009. Consumptions in the market registered even deeper declines. In 2010, the best performing economies were Albania and Kosovo. Kosovo with 3.4%. And still, these are the economies which are less integrated into the global economy. Some analysts say that these trends compare favorably with those reported from the economies of European Union and Eastern Europe. But we should not forget the very low economic level of this country and the catch-up effect. The economies were indirectly impacted by the global crisis, since their banking system were not directly exposed to the financial crisis, so no major private banks went bankrupt. And although the banking system is owned mostly from foreign institutions, so foreign companies, most of their assets are covered by the domestic deposits. And unfortunately, we should say that the region has the least developed banking system in Europe. So the negative effects were spilled over through different factors. The first one is foreign direct investments, which really fell sharply in the region. So during the last 20 years, the region had experienced a high increase in foreign investments, but this still can be explained from the very, very low initial level. The worst indicators were noticed in Romania and Bulgaria. Bulgaria had a 50% decline in 2009 compared with the same period in 2008. That was also at the same time reflecting the high shares of FDIs, of foreign direct investments, in finance and real estate sectors. The second issue is regarding the export markets. Export markets mostly towards EU, Germany, Italy, Greece, and Austria dropped sharply in 2009, but they had some sign of stabilization in 2010. Countries which suffered more are Bosnia and Herzegovina, Fyrom, Romania, and Serbia, and some industries like aluminium or steel industry. Tourism was also negatively affected, mostly for countries such as Bulgaria, Croatia, and Montenegro, and Albania. So countries that were hit hardest from the crisis rely heavily on their exports, such as the case of Bulgaria, which 58.2% of the GDP is based on exports. While Albania or Serbia or Kosovo, they didn't feel a significant impact. The third factor is the decline of remittances from expatriate workers. So especially in the cases of Albania and Kosovo, and this doesn't affect only the domestic demand, but also the development of small and medium enterprises, where they were one of the main sources for the business capital. This impact is then reflected in the goods, capital, and labor markets. The fourth factor is the Greek crisis, which is impacting, and I think it will impact in the future, the region in a variety of ways because of the Greek links to the Balkans economy. The economic and social instability in Greece is going to impact, first of all, the prospects and the timing of some of the countries of Southeast Europe who want to join European Union, since Greece will not be able, in the short term, to play the role of advocate in the region for the European Union integration. We should not forget the plan, the Agenda 2014 that Greece had to integrate the countries of Western Balkans in few years into the European Union. Some other negative spillovers from the Greek crisis are the risk of financial contagion. The Greek banks are heavily involved in the region, having a share of 20% of the market in the financial sector, and other negative impacts on trade, foreign direct investments, and remittances. Trade relations with Greece are especially important for Bulgaria, Albania, Romania, Fyrom. Greek companies are heavily involved in these countries through direct investments, mostly in the banking and telecommunications sector. And Greece is, by the way, is the first or the second main investor, foreign investor, in all the countries of the region. We should not forget also that donations and economic assistance from Greece was very important for these countries. One of the plans, just to mention, is the Greek plan for economic reconstruction for the Balkans of 500 million euros. So I don't know in the short term this plan is going to be, this money is going to be given in assistance to this country or not. The Greek crisis is also a problem because of the similarities between Greece and the former communist Balkan countries. Like Greece, in these countries, there is corruption, there is large informal economies, tax avoidance, rapid expansion of consumer credit, and these are some of the common characteristics of the region. I'd like to focus a little bit more on the foreign direct investments, which was one of the main factors that spilled over the impact of the global crisis in the region. And we all know that after the fall of communism in the 90s, all the countries of Southeast Europe, they embraced open trade and investment regimes. The main aim, the main objective of these countries was the integration in the global economy, and foreign direct investment was seen as one of the main drivers. So governments of this country encouraged the attraction, the inflow of FDI, believing that this would be beneficial not only for growth and development, but also for their faster integration into the European Union. Transition countries has used FDI as one of the main and most sustainable sources for private capital, transfer technology, and managerial skills of great quality and technology, and gain better access to the world markets. So, as you see, the share of FDI in the 90s was less than 1% of the world total, and then it went increase in 2008, like 6.9%. This is Central and Southeast European countries. The effects of FDI, so the foreign investments influence the host country through direct and indirect effects, so spillover effects. Direct impact from FDI affect growth rate, employment, exports, quality of products, technology, know-how, etc. The indirect effects occur through the spillover of advanced technologies and know-how, creation of linkages and demonstration effects, and they upgrade the degree of competition in the market. So why am I bringing all these theoretical effects or impacts of FDI in the region? Because I think, and based on the study that has been done a few years ago, I think they are really vital for the region. And you could see even that the fall of foreign investment was really brought to negative effects on the growth of these countries. But not everyone agrees on the positive effects of FDI for the host country economy. There is debate also about that, and there are supporters that show that FDI might bring also potential drawbacks on the host country economy, including a deterioration of the balance of payments, crowding out effects of domestic companies, lack of positive linkages with local communities, etc. Even more after the crisis, the skepticism on the positive impacts of FDI has increased. So it is important to understand that this is a very complex relationship. The benefits do not accrue automatically and evenly across countries, regions, and sectors, but there are the national policies that are very important for attracting FDI and reaping their full benefits for development. So the linkage, the positive effect, they will depend on the absorptive capacities in the country, which is the human capital, the trade openness, the domestic financial institutions, and the quality of institutions. So based on statistical data, FDI for the period 92-2009, in the case of Southeast European countries, point out the importance of FDI in stimulating growth and development in these economies. So based on the study, they have positive effects on the growth, and the effects seems to be much stronger when we have to do with greenfield investments, so investments which are not related to the privatization process. The quality of reforms and institutions is significantly important for the positive effects of FDI in Southeast Europe. So countries need to have a certain threshold, a certain level of development of institution and good governance in order to profit from foreign investments. The level of human capital, the trade openness, etc. are also very significant. So the study has shown that the most two important factors for growth in the last 20 years